Hey everyone, Pat and Posh here. Before we get on with today's episode, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our guests, subscribers, and supporters, and say thank you so much for tuning in and listening over the past couple of months. We've had a blast thus far, and as we kick off 2018, we're super excited to share more stories of some incredible founders behind the businesses, startups, and movements that make LA what it is.
Also, if you're enjoying the Founder Hour so far, we would really appreciate it if you guys could take a second to subscribe and rate us in iTunes. It means more to us than you could imagine. All right, let's get the show on the road.
You'd see these lawyers that would come stressed out. We're almost looking forward to this like quick interaction of their order because our team members had made them feel so welcomed. It was like it was an escape for them to come down and order from us.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? We're hanging out with Mario Del Perro. He's the co-founder and CEO of Mendocino Farms. You're tuned in the Founder Hour, by the way. Mario, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks. It's great to be here with you guys.
Yeah, so kind of to kick it off, we usually kind of like to start off with the backstory. So why don't you tell us kind of about your maybe college days leading up to your first business, and then we can kind of start from there.
I think it's definitely maybe a little bit of a different path in kind of how I found the restaurant business. It was definitely not my trajectory when I was at USC. I was absolutely going to go be a lawyer, and that was
Great decision.
Yeah, totally right. Funny enough, a lot of people told me not to go do that.
Me too. I didn't listen.
Yes, there it is, nurse. But I was getting my degree in international relations, and a good friend of mine had just graduated. His dad had actually been a major restaurant bar owner named Ron Newman. He created a concept called the Red Onion. So it was actually these unbelievably popular kind of Mexican full-service restaurants, but then had a nightclub attached to it. It was a really interesting, innovative type concept. But it was actually the first concept to be like multi-unit that would actually do over 10 million, which was very rare. This is pre Cheesecake Factory, pre PF Chang's, pre Yard House. So to be able to do those numbers and own 12, 14 of them was pretty special. He's a pretty smart guy. He'd definitely come through some difficult times, and actually that business had gone bankrupt. And his son was graduating from SC, and he was a very smart guy. And they were creating a new concept from all of their learnings. And I guess my curiosity, I was taking a bunch of classes, entrepreneur classes for the non-business major that USC would offer, and said, hey, could I be a fly on the wall and kind of be your Sherpa and carry your luggage while you guys went on this tour of deciding what the next concept would be. And admittedly, in the time that I spent with them as they were kind of visiting places and talking about what the next concept could be, is when I really caught the bug. Because they weren't saying like, hey, this is cool or this is a good recipe. The whole conversation was around who is our core customer and how are they not being serviced? How are they not having their needs being met? How can we build a concept around this core customer that isn't being done? And that level of innovation and kind of solving a problem that needed to be solved is what really kind of got me excited. And then just balancing this idea of the law is very zero-sum, right? I win, you lose.
Right.
And I saw very early on when we opened the concept, Sharky's, spelled Keez, not the
one that exists now, yeah.
But the one, they actually exist, but they're all Hermosa Beach, Manhattan
the
Beach.
Bar,
the
absolutely.
bar kind of
Baja
taqueria.
Sharky's, right?
Baja Sharky's, that's exactly right. So we ended up opening, and I was blown away because here they are, they're making huge amount of money by making people happy. And in fact, the bars around them were starting to make more money. So it wasn't this,
and
well, yeah, it wasn't this zero-sum game. All of a sudden, like, kind of all ships rise with high tides. I'm like, God, I could be part of a business that not only, like, do I make great money, but the guy next to me is kind of like, dude, right on. Like, come on, let's create some synergy together.
Right.
And that, those two kind of ideas really resonated with me of something that that could be great to spend my time on. Now, of course, then I had to deal with my dad, who was CEO of a large meat processing family created company. Had been around for almost 80 years. Our sole clients are restaurant groups, right? So here I have my dad, who is a vendor to restaurants, going, 9 out of restaurants fail. This is the worst thing you could ever do. I didn't pay for USC for you to go be in restaurants. So that was
what I was about to ask.
That was my
like,
support network.
You sort of grew up kind of around hospitality. Your dad had his own company. Why did you go to college? Why didn't you kind of just go in with business with your dad?
Yeah. My vision was to work anywhere but for the family company.
Okay.
So the idea of going to be a lawyer was definitely part of a plan to not go run a meat company. So it was just the opposite, right?
Yeah.
Why not go the easy path? Has probably been my theme. Is like, let's figure out the hardest path and take it. So needless to say, I ended up working for the Newmans and learning an enormous amount, and absolutely starting to understand why really that 9 out of 10 restaurants fail, but 1 out of 10, I would argue that person's always successful because they evolve, they pivot, they grow, they learn. 9 out of 10 restaurants fail because the restaurant industry has such a low barrier to entry. A lot of people are buying themselves a job, but they in fact should never be running a business. So that's probably about 50%. So 5 out of 10 restaurants should have never even opened. And then there's, some wiggle room on the other 4 out of 10. A lot of people are very, very smart. They get in the restaurant business, but they're smart in other fields. They're lawyers or doctors or real estate people saying, wow, the restaurant business looks really easy. And it is a simple business on the surface. But in order to scale it, and this is a lot of the growth that I'm still, learning, there's so much process, systems, and infrastructure that has to be put in place to really scale successfully. And that's why you see a lot of that 4 out of 10 that still fail think that they own it because they have one successful. But the minute they start scaling, the business implodes because they're truly not students of the business. They truly haven't dug into the amount of infrastructure and systems that it takes to create an experience that's elevated, but in a consistent way. Right.
So Mario, you now have graduated college and you're kind of just dove into this new venture that you didn't really know that you wanted to get into in the first place. In fact, you were trying to avoid it by going to USC.
Yeah.
What were you thinking, being in this thing that you don't really know what you're doing at that point in time?
Yeah, I pride myself as being a really fun guy that most people I think would want to have a beer with.
Right.
Because I like having beers. But at the same time, I definitely, pride myself on being fairly nerdy. And while I didn't know a lot about the restaurant business, I really dug in. When I right from the get-go, if I was going to give any advice, is commit. Right, I fully committed. I wasn't dabbling in the restaurant business as much as no support from my family. I was fully committed, and Google really wasn't active in 1995, but I did go. Weirdly enough, there's such things as bookstores, and I went to them and got every book that had to do with the restaurant business. Even though I couldn't barely afford it, I got every periodical, every magazine. I joke around with the editors now of Nation's Restaurant News, that like I could barely afford their subscription, but I got it. I've been a proud receiver of Nation's Restaurant News since '95, right? And I really dived in, and I didn't dive in just reading it on the surface. I really dived in looking for movements, looking for trends, trying to understand the different categories, and that's what really led me to actually leaving Sharky's after, by the way, I stayed for over 3 years after
Okay.
college, 2 years in college. So 5 years I was with Baja Sharkies.
What was your role at Baja Sharkies?
I started as a bouncer. I was rapidly promoted to being a bus boy. Responsible.
cool.
Yeah. A lot of throw up in that place. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, you learn very quickly that no job too small. And by the way, I was the lowest on the totem pole, so every bad job was mine.
Yeah.
And then I ended up finally making it to bartender, and from there, Greg Newman and for that matter Ron had a lot of trust in me. And when I decided not to, or when I graduated college, they actually made me general manager at an unbelievably young age. I mean, I was 21 years old.
This
as
is the
a GM.
Hermosa Beach location?
This is the Manhattan Beach,
Manhattan
but at that time it was actually called El Porto.
Okay.
Because no one in Manhattan Beach would allow North Manhattan to be called North Manhattan. So it was El Porto. That's the original. I was GM of that at probably 21 years old. And a lot of that was because Greg knew one, my honesty, and there's a lot of cash going through that place. And then he also knew that I definitely, and I joke around with this, but I've been an old soul. I laugh that now I'm 45 going on 60, right? So at the time I was probably 21 going on 35. So, and he knew that I definitely had the patience and the people skills to deal with all the personalities, because really by the time you're a general manager, you're in the people business.
Right.
And I'd had a lot of leadership roles throughout, my early years. So he gave me this great position, and really with very little roadmap, and I kind of had to figure it out. But over the course of a year or two, I really did figure it out, and they were expanding. So I was fortunate enough to allow them to give me the opportunity to write the training materials, to really codify what made us special as we expanded to new locations. And that's when really my nerdy side, my growth came in, because while I think a lot of people would have just taken other training manuals, I really was excited to take some of the progressive leadership training that I'd had in my youth and really apply it to this new business. And I think it gave it a new perspective in a lot of ways. And some of those things are massive innovations that you see today in Mendo. Was early days in Sharkies, writing those manuals at 22, 23. So by the time I was 24, I noticed that there was a new category that was emerging. It was just called better. And it was just slightly better than fast food. So it was better quality ingredients. It was the quality ingredients that you'd find from casual dining, presenting in a fast food format.
So essentially fast casual.
Which is now called fast casual.
Right.
That's right. So at the time they were calling it Better Mexican, was Baja Fresh. And
Right.
so I was spending a lot of time driving out to actually the Valley, where we're here today, going to see the early Baja Freshes and really appreciating what they were doing for the Mexican segment, but in general that this could be laid over on a lot of categories. And that's when I started writing kind of the business plan for a better teriyaki concept that was first called American Bento Company, and we later rebranded it after completely failing, called it SKUs.
So this is that you left Baja Sharkies.
So I
to start
left
this
Baja
business.
Sharkies to go create this better teriyaki concept.
And was it just you, or did you have a
I had
partner?
two awesome, genius partners still to this day. They're unbelievably successful human beings, and the mere fact that I couldn't work with them as a partner is probably more my failure than theirs. One of which ended up, when he left in pure anger, yelled back. I asked him, like, where are you going, right? As he stormed off after like a meeting, like, he said, I quit, I'm out of here. He's storming off. I'm like, what are you going to go do? Right. Cause we'd all left, our jobs to do this. We were all in together. And he goes, I'm going to go be a lawyer. And I go, what a weird thing to say. And now still to this day, he's my restaurant lawyer, and he's the most successful restaurant lawyer in the country. He runs the largest restaurant law practice. I think he has over 80 lawyers in his group, and has created an entire category. We're best of friends, and we're on the phone every single day. So it's great that it came full circle. And
So I think the lesson is, if you get angry after a meeting, go to law school.
There you go.
And
you're out on law school.
And then circle back to your business partner and hope he's still around.
Exactly.
So yeah, it was pretty cool. And then the other guys, like unbelievably successful in real estate. So I started with 3 partners. I think we had a decent business plan.
And were they your friends like in college? Like how did you meet?
Fraternity brothers in college, all trying to kind of figure it out. And yeah, we all got together and thought that this category was great and that we should invest our time and effort. And there was just a lot of things that we still hadn't learned yet, and I go back to, I give advice all the time to young up-and-coming restaurant guys. Hey, look, first of all, fully commit, be a student of the business. But the second thing is spend as much possible time, doesn't matter what they pay you, but working for the best, right? And I had gone through working for the Newmans, which was incredible. I probably needed one more job, right? I needed one more great group to go work for, to have that different perspective. There was a lot of things that Sharky's, Baja Sharky's, cured because of their massive alcohol sales. So, and there was more I needed to know on food costing and packaging and some of these other nuanced items. And it was a tough learning curve. I joke around and say that I got my MBA from the School of Hard Knocks because, you truly are able to appreciate some success, but you can't until you've actually like kind of hit rock bottom. And when both your business partners quit and there's no more money in the bank account and you can't make payroll and you have to go take out credit cards and get cash advances on credit cards to go pay for your team, you know where bottom is.
Yep, definitely.
I totally know what that feels like when you have to move out of your apartment and crash on someone's couch. Been there. The sexiness of being a restaurant owner.
So you're in that position. Like, how do you get out of it? Like, what do you do at that moment?
I joke around all the time because I can't tell you how many times I've gone back to that kind of 90, 120-day period of which I was teetering on bankruptcy, had to just keep figuring out how to not spend money. And at the same time, the one thing that or maybe 2 things that were kind of big was I very quickly stopped feeling sorry for myself, right? And went into how are we going to, what's the big idea here?
Right.
How are we going to pivot this? How are we going to, evolve this? Right. And then the second thing is then having kind of the balls to go work the plan. Right. So I ended up, I took a loan out from my sister, my younger sister, right. Of like, I think she loaned me 10 grand so I could change the name. I remember going across the street. There was a really high-end gym in Manhattan Beach. It was actually technically El Segundo across the street in Rosecrans, and getting this nutritionist to do a whole nutritional breakdown of my menu. And it actually helped me change some of the dishes so they'd be hyper healthy. And in doing that, she said,
This is still at SKUs.
This is still SKUs. She recommended all of her clients to have to eat at my restaurant. This is, if you're, stop telling me excuses, just go eat, your meals at SKUs. Right. If you like are stuck and you can't do the diet that I've set out for you. So I had a built-in guest. I totally pivoted to being healthy. It stopped being better teriyaki. It was better for you. And yes, it had kind of this spin around that. So all the sauces were pulled off. You put them on yourself, right? And then a name that kind of more people understood what the hell it was. Literally, I opened and saw a 25% increase, and that just kept building. Wow. And it was a total pivot. I go back to it all the time because there's been plenty of other dark moments, in my professional career. And I think once you've kind of fully dusted yourself off after getting bucked really hard, you always are going to get back on. Right. You know what I mean? And it was probably my darkest moment, and it's the one I go back to most for kind of inspiration, right?
Right.
So,
Mario, what I'm curious about is, there's these 2 catchphrases: "Fake it till you make it," and you'll just figure it out. But it's easy to kind of look back and say, I did figure it out, or I did kind of get through it. But how do you deal with that sort of uncertainty? When you're working for yourself, and I think this is this would be great advice for young entrepreneurs or just young visionaries. When you're going in and doing something yourself, like there's no salary, there's no insurance. I mean, you're really kind of dependent on yourself, literally. But how do you deal with the, whether it's the anxiety or the, just the overall uncertainty of, the future?
I'll give you the three things that I think you're asking me is first, and yes, I have used the word fake it till you make it.
All the time.
But what I think that lacks, because I've used it, is really okay. You have a predicament, you have a challenge, right? Or some people spin it and go, these are your opportunities,
right?
They're challenges, right? How do you go about addressing it? How do I address that, right? And then the other side is all of the psychological side of like how do I manage self-doubt, and how do I manage, mentally my attitude and how I think about the business, right? And then I think the third side, right, is who do I bring along, right? Who do I have to, how do I reinforce myself, right? And actually help complement myself, right? So I potentially don't face the same challenges, right? So I think with the challenges, particularly with the restaurant business, maybe far more, but it's one I know. Always for me, mentorship has been probably one of the biggest ways of helping compartmentalize and sort out, right? You're overwhelmed by it. If you start breaking it down, you start compartmentalizing it, and you start actually talking to people that have potentially been there or at least have something to relate that's going to give you the context of making a far better decision, right? Because you can learn from their mistakes or their successes.
Right.
So I've always leaned on mentorship. Very early, I was cold calling people that probably had no business talking to me, but they took the time to talk to me because I think they did the same thing.
Right.
So
I think they understood the benefits of having that board of advisors, even if it's an informal board of advisors.
100%. I think you nailed it. The second thing, the psychological and the attitude and the self-doubt, that's a little bit of the intrinsic side of like what makes a great entrepreneur, and you start to go like, well, that word grit, comes to mind. And there's a certain way that like your balls are bigger, you know what I mean? And that you have to have a certain level of confidence, not cockiness. I think there's a massive amount of benefit from humility and reflection and being your own worst critic, right? I see people that are arrogant and cocky. That's not big balls, you know what I mean? That's not someone that's going to be a successful entrepreneur. But when I see grit, and I see someone that is reflective and is their own worst critic, that's someone that's actually going to continue to evolve and grow. So I it's hard for me to say like, oh, get a, you're starting out entrepreneur, get a life coach. Yeah, for sure. I think there's plenty of being that student of the business. There's plenty of books that you should be enriching yourselves with that's going to help you, be out of your head and be clearer, and be more present. But I also think that there's a lot of life experience that allows some entrepreneurs to be better entrepreneurs and to have that grit. Chris Rock, I went and saw, him just a couple weeks ago. He's
Did not
hilarious.
think that we were going to get a Chris Rock.
Oh, we have to go to
here,
Chris Rock. Chris Rock was so great. He was talking about taking his daughters to their private school, and the headmaster speaks like, this is a bully-free environment. I want you to know that you're getting that for this amount of money that you're paying. Mm-hmm. And he goes, I want bullies. I love bullies. Like you don't think Bill Gates wasn't bullied? Like, what do you think kept him in the in the computer lab? You know what I mean? Do you think Chris Rock wasn't bullied? What do you think made me so funny? Like you start building this skill set to cope, right? So, but what he's really getting at in this bigger thing is kind of what Duckworth talks about in the book Grit, right? It's like this experience. We want to make sure we're giving our kids these experiences that give them grit. And even though I grew up in a town where my family owned a giant meat company. I'll tell you what, my dad never let me think that, right? I had to go, all I knew is I had to go work in the meat plant when everyone else was maybe going off doing fun stuff, so.
So you're at SKUs, you're building SKUs, and you sort of transform the business, and all of a sudden you get a big, spurt in growth, and it's going well. Tell us about the transition to Mendocino Farms. Like, why did you?
I opened a second SKUs, did really well on the second one. Opened a third, completely misbudgeted. was running massively short on dough during construction, and had to find an investor, and found the lady that I was dating at the time had made an enormous amount of money during the 90s dot-com boom, and ended up investing in my company. And I finally convinced my business partner to marry me. But Ellen actually came in and really started giving me metrics, and really gave the business kind of the business side of analysis. And really, I had to prove ROI in everything we did. And she helped us through, and ended up selling the SKUs concept. And at that point, we kind of settled back and said, "Hey, look, what is everything that we've learned? What were our successes? What are our wins?" Because I think you oftentimes can. Everyone says you learn from your losses.
Right.
I think you actually learn more from your wins. So what is everything that went right? And then go ahead. Let's do a little bit of an autopsy of we were in way too small of a category. What's the biggest category? Sandwiches. What are some big movements that we see going on? We saw a huge movement 14 years ago towards people caring about where their ingredients came from. That really turned out to be a movement. We saw that one of the big wins with our teriyaki concept is that we started understanding that we weren't selling teriyaki, we were selling happy. So we really had a good cultural foundation of this idea of we sell happy. And then we also had already built a pretty good catering company, and we knew that we were getting our wazoos kicked by sandwich concepts because we were doing hot catering. Mm-hmm. So you had to go back and pick it up, or you had to have kind of ghetto chafing stuff that got thrown away. And to be able to compete in a category that we already knew with a product that we knew we could make better, it was pretty easy. And then the last one was the advent of better coffee. 14 years ago, Starbucks was tiny. There were probably 700 Starbucks, but everyone was calling them a third place. And we said, wow, if they're calling a coffee shop a gathering place, as small as they are, synergistically, if we go right beside them, we could actually be the modern day cafe. We could be these modern day gathering places. Let's not do coffee. Let's just always put a Mendo right beside coffee. Right. And now we're a cafe. And we saw that as a powerful business plan, and that's why you see most Mendos, we have a coffee shop right by us. Yeah. Right? It's part of the marketing, plan. And by intent, we'll go and recruit a coffee shop to be right beside us. So those are the things we were going on, and we had written that up, and we were able to finance it ourselves because of the sale of SKUs, and went and did the first one. And
where was the first location?
First one was downtown LA, just underneath the Museum of Contemporary Art in a failed Starbucks. So we actually opened a little tiny coffee shop right beside it.
You opened it yourself?
We opened ourselves.
Part of Mendocino Farms, or a complete different brand?
Renamed it. It was Tao Tea and Coffee.
Okay.
Right? So we were trying to do a tea coffee thing.
If you added the Z in there, it would have been, that Starbucks tea brand.
I know. And I probably could have made a ton of dough, selling it to them. That would have been way good. Yeah, we failed. Yeah. We failed running the coffee tea thing. Not surprised.
So you had done SKUs, sold it, opened up this new concept.
Started Mendo, line out the door, 70 deep. And then that's where the reflection, I think a lot of people were like, hey, how do you not scale the hell out of this?
Do you think that was because of your success with SKUs, or what do you think that was just the concept made sense, it was in the right place every time?
Sandwiches are in everyone's rotation. Yeah. And at that time, we were competing against, the only thing on Bunker Hill was Subway. Right. Maybe a Quiznos. Right. So we were doing something, and it's a bunch of high-end lawyers and accountants. Right. So it's
very corporate.
It's our demographic. It's a bunch of former SC and UCLA people that I went to school with that don't even want to eat Subway and Quiznos. So we were giving them the number one product that they would prefer at the quality that they needed at a price point that was absolutely approachable. It checked all the boxes. Right. So out of the gate, we were doing giant numbers.
So how fast was your growth from location 1 to 2 to 3 to?
And I think that's just it. I think you're going to hear all the time that in the restaurant business that there's a land grab. Never in the history of the restaurant space has there been a land grab. There just hasn't, right? So we pumped the brakes and actually really started analyzing whether we were just busy because we were only competing against a Subway and a Quiznos, or did we actually have something special, and how could we make it more special? And then likewise, what are the systems that we needed to put in place to be able to scale this? So we spent 4 more years writing not only just training materials, we invested in a central kitchen. We were doing all of it on site. We invested in real infrastructure, real processes, and then real people. Like we brought in a trainer, we brought in a chef partner, brought in some real backbone to the business. And then year 4, we opened both store 2 and 3. Store 2 was a block away, killed it, did better than store 1. And then we opened store 3 in Maria del Rey and got our wazoos kicked, and not in a people didn't show up. It was so insanely busy that that we had to go back and study it, because our guest was pretty unhappy in suburbia. We were doing a very urban concept and presenting it very urban in suburbia, and we weren't being as thoughtful to that suburban guest. And we actually made massive adjustments in store 4. So we took a whole year off, studied store 3, and then adjusted that and opened West Hollywood and 3rd and Fairfax back to back, which were more suburban. We changed from a pay last to a pay first kind of model. We still kept our bifurcated ordering system, which is kind of unique to us. And then we ended up changing the dining room size by store 5, and actually really making it bigger so you could take a stroller through. And moms didn't feel, we had kids corners so kids could play and get up, and really started evolving the concept. And then since then, we've opened anywhere from 2 to 3 restaurants per year, until actually this year. This is the first year that we're opening 7.
Wow.
So kind of going back to that first concept, I mean, there's a few years until you opened location 2, and you had, right out the gate, you had a massive success, line out the door, like you said. What advice would you give to founders of just food concepts, restaurants, bars that get that initial, out the gate traction? Like, for example, Howlin' Ray's, I'm sure you've heard of them.
Yeah.
Line out the door every single day.
Yeah.
Hours
Totally.
and hours of wait. And they're already expanding really quickly. So it's like, why did you take 3 years? What was that process like for you? Why didn't you could have opened a second location that year if you wanted to, right?
Yeah, totally. You know what? I'd recommend you ask yourself 3 questions, right? First question you want to ask yourself is am I so busy because geographically my competition blows, right? Like I'm the tallest midget, right? Is that because you really want to gauge yourself, on is it that good? If I went into another area that was hyper more competitive, would in fact I be as craveable? Okay. The second thing that I think you have to look at is, do I have the infrastructure? Is it a cult of personality? Is it a great chef that knows the recipes, or it's a few great people that are able to execute on the promise? Or have I gotten this so simplified, right? The genius in making it simple, that this can be replicated consistently at the same volumes without these badasses at the helm, right? And that's the second question you want to ask yourself, right? And then the third, and I know for us, and I don't know for Howlin' Ray's and everything else, right, is what are then, right, in scaling, right, what is the support that's needed / infrastructure that's needed, right? So do you have to have a bigger centralized kitchen? Can your third-party vendors actually extend? Do you need a support team in district managers? Who do you need in your support center? Do you need a support center? What are all the pieces that you now have to put in place? Because when you have one, man, we were out on a picnic table out in front of the restaurant with a laptop and a backpack. You know what I mean? By 3, you start to actually need a place to land. You know what I mean? You need a graphic designer. You need some of these things you can't do it yourself. Can't do yourself. You need someone actually being a culinary trainer. You need so you need to start. What are those things? And I think what that third question you have to ask yourself is, what are those pieces? And then in that third question, how much is that? Because that eats, we look at the profit of like the one store, but we don't look at as your G&A and like, what is it going to take to support that to do it, right? So I would ask myself those 3 questions. We did, and we needed a central kitchen. So we spent all the money that we would have spent on building a second store to building a badass kitchen that made our food taste better. And the minute that we went into a hyper competitive area of Maria del Rey, our food was better, right? And then we even went back at store 2007 and completely revamped our catering because we actually saw catering in other cities like New York looked better than ours. And even though we weren't competing in New York, we took those looks and brought it back to the LA market. And we're even, we were probably already a dominant caterer player. We became even more dominant because we kept pulling these great ideas, kept evolving, kept investing, right?
So Mario, I think one theme that I get from everything you've said so far, and specifically those 3 points that you just made, was that as a founder, you need to be honest with yourself, because all the things that you're talking about, the numbers, the way that the people, the customers were reacting to it, it's very easy to start believing yourself and thinking like, I have the best sandwich, people are gonna come.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you're like, I could be wrong if the people aren't actually coming, How difficult is it for you to be honest with yourself, with your business specifically?
Yeah. So I actually think it's really easy, but it's also, it goes back to that intrinsic quality that I said that I think makes a good entrepreneur. I think, that you see a little bit of, and by the way, I'm not trying to compare myself to like a Steve Jobs or, no, but I would bring up and I'd reference like, there's something, entrepreneurs are typically wired a little bit differently, right? Like I am filled with so much self-doubt, right? That I constantly look at our food and look at how we can tweak it and make it better, right? We do as much innovation is renovation. We go back to our pre-existing items and guests don't even notice. And we spend almost 60% of our time tweaking the stuff that's on the menu than even the innovative stuff that you see and think it's 100% of the time. So for me, I'm constantly going to, fine dining restaurants or into other towns and seeing stuff, and I'm just nuggets of genius.
Just drawing inspiration.
Just everywhere, going like, God, could we do that? We're about ready to present for on January 15th, this, we call it the Pastrami Project. But it's been this massive, I've spent probably in just hard money, maybe $500,000 on our smokehouse, our consultants, the whole thing, because I was inspired 6 years ago. I went into this little hole in the wall in Brooklyn, New York, this place called Miles End, and the chef was doing the best pastrami I'd ever tasted in my life. I'm like, why is this so much better than what I'm familiar with? And he goes, I'm actually old school house smoking it. I'm treating it like brisket. You're tasting real bark. The other product, I hate to break your heart, it's manufactured, right? And that's just, it's smoke flavored. It's not real bark. I'm like, God, this is big. This is important. This is important for the genre that I'm in. Right. How can we not take a supportive role, and streamline off of what the chef has done? And it's been this massive journey that now is coming to fruition. But I think you have to a little bit see genius in everyone else. And to your point of like, hey, yeah, we're already, selling more sandwiches than maybe anyone in LA, right? Oh my God, don't think like that ever, right? We constantly go like how are we going to be better? How are we going to innovate? Where are we getting inspiration? And we're not moving with the wind, but we're thoughtfully challenging ourselves constantly. If I could tell you the investment of things that you guys haven't even seen as guests because it just never made it. We were going to make our own from scratch sausages. You know what I mean? Like
I wouldn't have minded that.
I would
not mind having that.
It was like, hey, we're still tinkering, all the way to, we just did I was in Houston on a food tour, went to this killer place, Local Foods. Guy does an exceptional job, and the architecture is just amazing too. But and I was eating this thing that I felt like was pretty rudimentary. That's why I ordered it. But they were like, it's most popular. It was a taco salad. And I'm like, I've had crushed myself a taco salad here and there, And the guy did it kind of with more of a fine dining approach. And it really kind of inspired. And we went back and we're like, hey, what's a modern version of this? I really felt like it was a fine dining guy's version of kind of mom's taco salad, which was okay. But we really kind of asked ourselves, is there an elevated version that would be very much Mendofying it, right? And at the time, we had the guys from Impossible Burger, which is actually kind of against what we believe for vegan cooking. We think that our vegan guest wants to taste vegetables and doesn't want to taste faux meat. But we also understand that we have a clientele that's really becoming flexitarians, really herbivores. That are really starting to move the vegetables. Our data is showing that we're moving vegetables to the center of the plate and the protein to the side.
It's very like plant forward, right?
So very much plant based. So we're like, God, there's something there. And they were talking about that they're extra trim for making their burgers. Do we have a use for them? We're like, my God, we do. What if we made like our own chorizo from this plant-based burger, right? And then put it over this kind of modern-day taco salad that was completely vegan, but we do a vegan ranch, and in fact, the cotija cheese is actually nutritional yeast. That felt like a modern, innovative vegan taco salad that's just as indulgent and rich, but it's heart healthy and is actually fairly low calorie, right? But has like kind of a fattiness that kind of dissipates super fast, right? So I knew it just felt in line, but it's a great example of like we're pulling nuggets,
constantly iterating,
Yeah.
Something you mentioned earlier on, and something we sort of want to end with here, I guess, is you mentioned like with SKUs, and I'm sure with Mendocino Farms, you're selling happy, right?
Yeah.
How do you sell happy?
Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and continue this for the next 45 minute podcast.
Part two.
Part two. In defining what is, why do we sell happy versus how do we sell happy? And I think there's two, so why do we sell happy is the fact, that you go to, I think one of the things that's helped Mendo with whatever success we've had to this point is that we started with our why. We knew what our what was, sandwiches and salads, but we actually started with a why. And one of those whys, like one was support local farmers and artisans that deserve it. Second was to be a neighborhood gathering place. The third was we sell happy. That was our why. It was on day one, and then we actually live it even stronger 12 and a half years later. The why we sell happy was that we were noticing at SKUs that people were coming down, stressed out lawyers, zero sum, right? It comes full circle. Stressed out, pissed off lawyers.
Yep.
And we had some SC team members that were so unbelievably smart, right, at register that these, I remember these two girls had remembered almost everyone's name. They'd created these lists and what they usually order because there was a lot of regulars. So they were greeting by name and knew like they were in this conversation. And then they had a tip. They had asked, hey, can we put out a tip jar? I'm like, absolutely. And they were crushing it in tips.
Because it's like a small neighborhood at this point, right?
Absolutely. So they were like kind of the norm at Cheers, right? But you'd see these lawyers that would come stressed out. Were almost looking forward to this like quick interaction of their order because our team members had made them feel right so welcomed. It was like kind of it was an escape for them to come down and order from us, right?
And did you have the person sort of at the front, like back in the day too, when when you walk in, like they're just kind of there helping you out?
No, that was an evolution, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So we saw that. By the way, we didn't create it. We saw this, and Ellen and I are going, God, like, what if we actually put some real like practice behind it? This is something special. And by the way, this is this idea of human connection, right? And at that time we thought technology, was crazy, right? This is now 16 years ago, right? Technology has gone so out of control. We had no idea people would be staring at, their phones nonstop at that time. But we're like, people need to feel loved. People need to feel cared for. There's great stories, of Howard Schultz, talking about, a guy coming up to him. And he's a tall guy, and this guy's like super bigger than Howard Schultz, thicker than Howard Schultz. He's in a suit, but he comes walking up to Howard Schultz, and Howard Schultz is a little intimidated because he actually notices the guy, even though he's in a suit, has a gun, and then quickly he sees that he has a badge, so he's okay. The guy goes up, "You own this place," and he's like, "Technically I don't own this place, but I'm founder, I'm CEO." And he goes, "Yeah, you own this place," and he goes, "I just want you to know I don't come here for caffeine." He's like, "Okay." And he starts listing all the team members' names. I come here for so-and-so, 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 and so-and-so. And he goes, oh, that's great. I'll pass it on to management. He goes, no, you're not hearing me. He goes, I don't even get caffeine when I come here. I actually can't have it. I get decaffeinated. He goes, okay, great. He goes, no, you're not hearing me. He goes, I come here every day at 3 o'clock because I have to, because so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so. And he's naming some people that aren't even in the building. He goes, actually reconnect me to humanity and show me that there's a place that people care for one another and that humanity is good. And in fact, it recharges me because and my job is a homicide detective. And by about noon, I actually have lost all my faith. And at 3 o'clock, I get recharged by these people. And I want you to know that these people know that they're doing more than just selling coffee.
It's an amazing story.
Right? And that resonates with you. John Mackey, told me a story first time he was mentoring me. Sorry, we're running over our time. Those of you that are on the commute, you're probably in the driveway right now. But John Mackey gave me a great story, and it really, really connected me. We'd had Mendo for a while, but he goes, when I was creating Whole Foods Market, I actually at the time. What resonated with me was this idea of being, and he heard it from his buddy that owned or created the Container Store, right? So the founder of the Container Store had shared the story with John. John had made it his. So
and now Mario's sharing it with you.
And now I'm now sharing it with you guys. But he goes, yeah. He always said this idea that I love is that when I created Whole Foods, I was I was an oasis owner. I bought an oasis, in the middle of a desert. So of course everyone knows, the one product I sell, right? So. My one guest is the person that's lost in a desert that comes, crawling up to me to ask me for my one product, right? Water. I want water. And damn it, I better be pretty good at delivering them water, right? I better be good at Whole Foods at giving them groceries. They're coming for groceries, right? But after I give them that water, can I do so much more, right? Can I give them shelter? Couldn't I give them maybe a phone to call people that they needed? Couldn't I give them ongoing workshops on how not to get lost in the desert, right? Couldn't I offer other things that are actually going to enrich their lives? And he goes, I'll tell you what, Whole Foods, on its surface better be good at being a grocery store, but I don't jump out of bed. I jump out of bed to enrich the people's lives, right? Be part of facilitating a healthier life for them. Right. And we have that opportunity once we deliver, the table stakes of that water. And we start thinking of the ability for us. And when I look at Mendo now, our team, that you see are not fast food workers. These are unbelievably intelligent, bright people that we've shared with them how to do very ordinary work at an extraordinary level. We teach them about the Fred factor. We teach them that you look like you're a busser. But let me tell you how you can influence, in a positive way and elevate that job of busing to being one that has a humanity to it, a human connection to it, right? You might be at register, but let me tell you, how you can elevate that position. And this is the promise that we give to every one of our team members who comes work here. So while it's really important for our guests that we sell that, it's unbelievably important for our team to know that they're working for a company that's purpose-driven, right? And that massively helps our culture thrive. And for that matter, hopefully help our culture scale.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mario, it's been a great conversation. Thanks so much for your time. Your energy and passion for this stuff is definitely, contagious, and you feel it when you walk into Mendocino. So you've done a great job, and can't wait to, see it grow and see what happens in the next, 5 to 10 years.
Guys, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mario.
Take care.